This previously uploaded video now includes our 2025 winter testing. If this is your first time watching, welcome and please enjoy. If you're returning for our winter test results, you can use the chapters feature to jump straight to that section right after our road, wet, and dry results summary.
We're back with another touring tire test, and it's this year's premium test. And the lineup looks a little different this time around.
To some people it might.
The lineup may look a little different this time around, but it's exciting because 5 of the 7 tires in this test are standard touring all-season tires, which are focused on delivering maximum tread life.
Yeah, most of the time our touring tire tests are comprised primarily of Grand Touring all-season tires. That's the larger category by volume, and the products tend to be a little bit more balanced at the expense of just a little bit of tread life.
Yeah.
But this year there were multiple new standard touring all-season tires on the market.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the tires in this test.
The 7 specs we've assembled for this test are from the biggest names in the tire world. We have 2 new standard touring all-season tires, the Bridgestone Turanza EverDrive and the Goodyear Assurance Max Life 2. The Yokohama Avid Ascend LX isn't new, but we've never tested it on our Camry, and it has always been a strong entry in the category, so we've included it here. The Continental True Contact Tour 54 was the highest finishing standard touring all-season tire in our last test, so we've brought it back as the performance benchmark. And of course, any standard touring all-season test would be incomplete without the customer favorite Michelin Defender 2, so we've included our usual control tire as one of the published specs in the test.
The Turanza Prestige is Bridgestone's newest entry in the Grand Touring all-season category, offering the promise of top-tier refinement combined with confident year-round traction. And we've included last year's test-leading Goodyear Assurance Weather Ready 2 as the benchmark Grand Touring all-season competitor.
So the standard touring all-season tires make that promise of extended tread life, 70,000, 80,000, even 85,000 miles, according to their mileage warranties anyway, compared to 60 to 70,000 for the Grand Touring all-season products. But nothing in tire design is free. So our testing is here to find out what sacrifices have been made in that pursuit.
Exactly, but regardless of any compromises we may find as a possible trade-off for that extra long tread life, one thing that every touring tire must offer is that quiet, comfortable refinement for the daily drive. And that's where our testing begins.
Bridgestone Turanza EverDrive. EverDrive sounds like it does something forever.
It drives forever.
Okay, so
Right. Long life tire, standard touring all season.
got it.
Would you want to live with it forever? Drive.
I could live with it forever.
Took him a minute, but that's okay.
It's fine. Yeah, I give these questions proper thought, and yeah, it's it's pretty good. It's mid pack.
In this test, a mid pack is still
Very good.
nearly like an 8 overall.
Right.
So we're talking the creme de la creme.
Wow.
Mount Rushmore of tires.
Anyway, so the ride is it's fairly firm,
Yes.
but it does a great job on the larger bumps and impacts.
Whereas some feel like they're like trying to resist the bumps, and so it kind of moves the
Right.
entire car, or it feels a little choppy. There is a small amount of choppiness in this tire, but in
Like
general,
here
yes,
specifically, yeah.
correct, yeah. But in general, yeah, I agree with you.
The noise, pretty good. Slightly elevated. Some tones coming out on the very smooth sections, but
Yep.
overall pretty
Yeah,
good.
but they were still quiet though.
Yeah.
They were
Right.
noticeable but quiet tones, yes. And a little bit of variety over coarse surfaces as well. And steering, I like the steering a lot. I called it cheerful. For a touring tire, it just did what you want. It wasn't overly fast. There wasn't really a dead spot, so it didn't feel darty. It just did exactly what I wanted when I wanted it to.
It feels fine. I didn't feel a massive difference between a control tire and this. It felt different, but I didn't think that natural ramp up was necessarily a scoreable attribute.
Right. The control tire has a little bit of nothing happens, and then it
Wow.
responds
Right.
very, very quickly. So it feels eager, let's say. This tire, it is just kind of linear.
and
It just
up, yeah.
gives you the exact same amount from top dead center all the way to full steering lock, and I liked it a lot. It felt very nice for a touring tire. Bridgestone Turanza Prestige. This is fun because Bridgestone launched 2 touring tires at the same time, essentially. They were just months apart. And so we get them both in this test. Turanza EverDrive, which is the long life version, and then Turanza Prestige, which is the Grand Touring all season, supposed to be a bit more balanced, maybe even a touch sporty, just, it doesn't quite sacrifice as much on the altar of long tread life. and they are very, very similar.
They're named appropriately, though.
They
That's
are.
for
One
sure.
is prestigious and one is
Yeah.
ever drivey.
Yeah.
Their evaluation kind of lines up to how you would expect. The steering feels sportier.
The steering does feel
The
sportier.
on center feels more firm,
Yes.
maybe a little more responsive, less dead spot as you turn the wheel.
Trans
from
Everdrive
top
didn't
to
have any
center.
dead spot.
Yeah, well,
It takes
this is more firm.
It takes a more concerted effort
Yes.
to change the nose
Yeah.
trajectory
Right.
of the car.
Right.
It feels heftier.
Right.
Ride tiny bit firmer, if at all. Brent is chalking it up to the different compound, might be a little bit stiffer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you didn't drive them back to back, you would have no idea. And noise, Transit EverDrive was slightly lower volume, slightly greater variety
Right.
of tones.
Right.
Turanza Prestige is a little bit higher volume and it's a little more consistent. It doesn't have the variety, it just has more of a...
Kind of a bassier, consistent tone.
Yes.
Very similar, but they are different tires for sure.
Continental True Contact Tour 54. We've tested it before on the road last time, on the road this time.
Did well.
It's a nice tire. It is
Still
a
nice.
pleasant tire to drive on the road. The ride is composed. It is
firmish.
firm, right?
Firmish,
We
yeah,
lead
yeah.
with firm pretty
Yeah,
frequently,
I
though.
know.
That is not the dominant
No.
feature of its ride. You know, it is composed. It is controlled. It does not feel like you're driving down the road on a couch, but it does a good job of just making impacts a non-event.
The steering's nice too right here. I mean, it's got a little bit of a dead spot, a nice linear ramp up in response. Is it the best steering I've ever had? No. Similar to another tire, apparently.
I
for
think
this
it feels
guy.
like the Transit EverDrive.
Yeah, this one feels just a hair sportier than the EverDrive did to me.
It has
but
a little bit more of a dead spot, too.
I totally get where you're coming from.
Noise is good.
Yeah.
On the smooth surface here, there are very few tones. What are there is muted and, kind of just blends in the background. Similarly, on coarse surfaces, nothing stands out as distinct. It just kind of all blends together and turns into background noise.
And that's the kind of noise that I appreciate, that I like.
Right, and that seems to be kind of the story with this tire. It fades into the background. It just allows you to just drive and doesn't draw any attention to itself in any way.
The Goodyear Assurance Max Life 2.
Assurance Max Life was good on the road.
It was.
We enjoyed it. Assurance Max Life 2 stepped it up a notch. Assurance Max Life 2 is better on the road than any other tire in this test.
The test winner on the road.
And part of it,
And
it is
is it
due
a Grand
in...
Touring All Season tire?
No, it's a standard
Oh,
touring all season
upset.
tire. It is cushy. It is soft. It rounds over bumps, small, big alike.
Big and small, you're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Noise was, as good as anything else in the test. There was nothing that stood out. Compared to the quietest tires in the test, maybe the volume was like a tiny bit more so, but there was nothing that really stood out, nothing that was distinct.
The steering's nice as well.
Right,
You
I
know,
like
it's,
the- I like
it's
the
again
steering.
one of those almost mildly sporty standard touring all season tires.
Yeah.
It feels good. It's got the right amount of response. It works great on the camera.
Yep, I said it's not too slow, not too fast, no real dead spot, but doesn't feel darty in any way. Just, it gets it right.
Goodyear Assurance Weather Ready 2. We've tested it before.
Yep.
It's Grand Touring all season. It's all weather.
Yep.
We liked it before.
We like it now. We have this fun contrast between the Assurance Weather Ready 2, which is Grand Touring all season, all weather, and Assurance Max Life 2,
Right.
standard touring all season, long life
Right.
focused. And this one, I think, more than the Bridgestone comparison, shows the differences between the two categories.
right.
Assurance Weather Ready 2 is a little bit tauter, a little bit firmer, feels almost sporty in the ride.
There's a little bit up and down, absolutely.
The noise, not quite as refined as Assurance
No.
Max Life 2.
But it has that more aggressive V-shaped pattern.
For the added traction, right? That's the trade-off there, probably. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a whirring noise.
There is some noise, a little bit of cyclicality, but it does a really good job
It does.
at combining the tones into one singular tone. It's 98% of the way there, which it's good enough for me.
Right. And for myself or for anybody I care about, I would take that small step down in the comfort in exchange for the increase in traction. I like the steering.
Yeah.
At lower speeds, maybe it's a little fast. It's good.
It's good.
It's good. But then at higher speeds, it feels just right.
Yeah.
So, good job. Very good. Not as comfort focused as its standard touring all season partner.
two good choices for two different tires because, hey, tires matter.
Aha! Michelin Defender 2. This tire is a standard touring all-season tire, and it's kind of the benchmark in consumers' minds.
It's a popular tire.
It is, it is. You know, any touring tire test, we get comments, hey, where's the Defender 2, where's the Defender 2? And really, the Defender 2 is always in our touring tire test. Yeah. We just don't always talk about it.
It's no secrets. It's our control
tire.
Right.
It is our control tire for touring tires, and that's whether it's on the Camry or the Stelvio for crossovers. Ride quality is where we start.
It is a firm tire, not harsh. It's firm. It's taut.
Yeah.
We use the word transparent quite often for this tire. You feel every crack here on the highway.
It makes every impact noticeable, but just a quick and succinct bump.
It's damped well.
Damped well, yes.
Yeah.
The one thing that I always add, because I always feel it when we drive this tire, is there's a little bit of choppiness to it. Just a little bit. It feels like on the rebound, when the tire is recovering, it's a little bit abrupt.
Sure.
So it just feels like this, I don't know, just a choppy motion. It's
over the repeated impacts.
Correct,
right.
yes, that. Noise is probably its strongest trait.
It is.
It's not the quietest tire in the world. There are some tones that come through, but in general, it just does a very nice job of blending everything into sort of a pleasant background.
It's a
type tone.
solid scoring standard touring all-season tire for noise.
Steering is one place that you and I feel the same thing, but we disagree on its goodness or badness a little bit, right? It is quick to respond to inputs. However, there is a very small dead spot where you initially give your input and not a whole lot happens.
Yeah.
And then it ramps up very quickly.
Right.
And to me, that feels a little bit non-linear, and it sort of lulls you into or like coaxes you into adding a little bit more input than you would need to if that dead spot weren't there, and it ends up being a little bit overreactive.
Right, and I think it gives you a nice on-center feel for when you're not trying to turn.
Very true.
When it is time to turn, it's going to respond quickly.
Yokohama Avid Ascend LX.
If I didn't drive this back to back with some very good tires, it would probably fly a little bit under the radar.
Right.
But we did, and it's not.
Right.
It's sticking out.
It is. On this coarse, cross-cut concrete, it creates kind of a dull roar that is...
It's more that traditional bassy tire noise, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
On the bumps, there's more up and down. Yeah. Yes, I mean, that's...
In my notes, I said that it makes me feel like the Chihuahua bobblehead doll on the dash because it's just this low frequency, just kind of this, like it's not bad, and it's soft in the same way that the Assurance Max Life 2 is, but it doesn't have that last little bit of refinement, so it just kind of...
It's missing some damping.
It is. That's why I said it's underdamped or undersprung.
And it was a little sloppy
On
in the steering, particularly on the on-ramp.
Right. On the road, it can't quite live up to the other tires in this competitive set.
Sure. After our on-road testing, it was time to evaluate each tire's performance in wet conditions. Around our skid pad, their ultimate lateral grip was tested, and we found the Goodyear Assurance Weather Ready 2 delivered the strongest performance at 0.74 Gs, with the True Contact Tour 54 only 0.02 behind. The Turanza Prestige, Assurance Max Life 2, and Avid Ascend LX all pulled a respectable 0.69 Gs. The Defender 2 and Turanza EverDrive rounded out the group, struggling to deliver front-end traction on the wet surface. On the flooded VDA, each tire's standing water lateral traction was tested. Once again, the Assurance Weather Ready 2 and True Contact Tour 54 were at the top, but were now accompanied by the Turanza Prestige at 0.67 Gs. The Avid Ascend LX and Assurance Max Life 2 were a step behind the frontrunners, with the Defender 2 and Turanza EverDrive not making up any ground on the competition in the deeper water. The strong wet capabilities of the Assurance Weather Ready 2 and True Contact Tour 54 continued in our emergency braking test from 60 to 0, with both getting the job done in 153 feet. After that, we started to show some differentiation. The Defender 2's 156-foot distance essentially matched the Turanza Prestige's longitudinal grip. The Assurance Max Life 2 and Turanza EverDrive were a foot apart near the back, with the Avid Ascend LX not quite matching its stronger lateral grip.
Our wet track testing allows us to determine each tire's dynamic traction, in addition to its ability to combine inputs for simulated emergency avoidance maneuvers. While ultimate lap times aren't part of the mission statement for touring all-season tires, differences in lap times are indicative of tires' differing abilities in everything from the daily drive to real-life emergency situations. On the wet track, The Assurance Weather Ready 2 held a comfortable lead of about a third of a second over the True Contact Tour 54, which also delivered a strong performance with its sub 34-second lap. The Turanza Prestige and Assurance Max Life 2 were in a virtual tie at 34.3 seconds, and the Avid Ascend LX was a half a second back from there. The Defender 2 and Turanza EverDrive both required more than 35 seconds to complete their laps, which is acceptable, but we would like to see better.
The subjective evaluation mostly followed the objective results, with the Assurance Weather Ready 2 and True Contact Tour 54 earning the highest scores. The Turanza Prestige was the top finishing new release, and it was satisfying overall.
It feels like just a step up in every way from its brand mate,
Right.
and also from a lot of the other tires in this test too. You know, it's confident, it does what I want, the braking is strong, the front end leads, the rear does engage just a little bit.
But it arrests the momentum quicker and faster, so you can tell the traction is actually doing something. Recovers mistakes quickly, losses of traction. Everything comes back to you sooner, which is what I want on a wet street.
The Turanza EverDrive and Assurance Max Life 2 were tied in the middle subjectively, each with their own pros and cons.
Bridgestone Turanza EverDrive. It pushes quite a bit.
Yep.
The steering is a little slower.
A good initial response, but it's kind of dull right after that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. We keep getting these like constant reminders that, hey, you know, the traction in this tire is just okay. Like don't push it too hard, don't overstep it, because you get a little bit of push here, a little bit of rotation or rear axle engagement there, and it's fine all around.
It's communicating fairly well.
There you go.
It's communicating its lower limits
Right.
fairly well. The Goodyear Assurance Max Life 2, traction's okay, it pushes. It recovers fairly quickly, which is certainly helpful.
Sure.
But I would like some more traction out here, but it's fine for standard touring LCs.
Yeah.
But fine is just kind of not a great word.
Right?
Yeah.
I like the steering compared to some of the other tires in this test. You know, it just feels a little bit more confident, a little bit more sporty-ish. But yeah, then it's let down a little bit by the available grip as well.
The Defender 2 is a familiar face for our team, and we've grown accustomed to its behavior. Fast steering feels nice, but its edgy traction characteristics means there's a fine line between grip and slip at the front axle, and the rear in the right situation. Yokohama's Avid Ascend LX was close to the Defender 2 with an incrementally lower braking score that ultimately found it at the bottom of the list.
The Yokohama Avid Ascend LX, traction's a little low. It can get a little tail happy.
A little bit.
Let it.
Yep.
We've had much better out here right now.
Steering's a little slow to respond.
Yeah.
Silver lining, one thing that I did notice was
Understeer?
yes, it did understeer. It absolutely understeered. But with its slightly slower steering, you could be a little bit, or you were encouraged to be a little bit more gentle with it, and that allowed you to combine a little bit of braking and steering or a little bit of throttle and steering, as opposed to other tires that had faster response. It's like, well, I'm already past the limit, so I can't do anything. With this one, it was a little bit easier to meter some things, to do two things at once,
So
kind of.
some decent balance.
Emergency braking from 60 to 0 in the dry was led by the Defender 2 at 129 feet, with the True Contact Tour 54 a few feet further. The two Goodyears essentially matched each other at 134 and 135 feet, and a modest step back found the Avid Ascend LX and the two Bridgestones, bringing the car to a halt in under 140 feet. It's not uncommon for tires in the same performance category to finish very closely on the dry skid pad, and the results from this test were the tightest we can remember. The two Bridgestones, the Assurance Weather Ready 2, and the Defender 2 delivered 0.85 Gs of lateral traction, and the other three tires finished at 0.84.
Our emergency lane changing maneuver tests each tire's ability to avoid a simulated obstacle on the road and safely return to the original lane of travel. It's performed at 45 miles per hour, and each tire is evaluated on its ability to pass the test in addition to its behavior and subjective characteristics. The Assurance Weather Ready 2 delivered a balanced, capable performance in the dry. The steering was responsive, but not overly so, and it mostly led with the front axle. Sometimes the rear would swing out a bit more than expected, which resulted in a few struck cones and ruined its perfect pass rate. The Assurance Max Life 2 was hot on the heels of its brand mate, and while it didn't feel as sporty, it was calm and collected and passed with every attempt.
The Goodyear Assurance Max Life 2.
It's easy, it's a non-event. It passes basically no matter how you do it, unless you're trying to fail.
The True Contact Tour 54 was another tire that passed every time, and it felt like a non-event when doing so.
Continental True Contact Tour 54. It's planted, it's poised, it's responsive enough. You know, it's not a performance tire, but
everything feels natural and predictable and
no problem.
I'm relaxed.
No muss, no fuss, right?
No grass was harmed in this tire.
The Avid Ascend LX succeeded on every attempt but one, and its single miss may have been driver-induced. It was among the best in the group at doing what we were asking it to, thanks to balanced behavior and metered response to steering inputs. Michelin's Defender 2 passes almost every time we test it, but it's not a comforting experience.
Michelin Defender 2. We're up to 45, and we're in, and we're through, and we're okay.
Yeah,
we're okay. It was good.
That was a good representation of the Defender 2.
It was.
It gets it done, it's just, it can be a bit of a handful.
It's a bit of a handful.
Yeah.
It has quite responsive steering. In fact, for a standard touring all-season tire, it is surprisingly tail-happy on a front-wheel drive Camry. It's a little edgy, and it gets the job done.
The two Bridgestone products felt similar, and interestingly, the Turanza Prestige earned a slightly higher subjective score, even though it succeeded on fewer passes than the Turanza EverDrive.
Bridgestone Turanza Prestige up to 45, and go, and go.
Wow.
And it has a very similar feel to Turanza EverDrive. It's not an equal and opposite reaction to your inputs, it's a magnified reaction to your inputs.
Right. I felt it build up and release, and all of a sudden, if you're behind, you're toast.
That's a good way to look at it. There's very little margin of error. If you get it just right, you're gonna pass, probably.
The Bridgestone Turanza EverDrive.
Yep. Bada bing, bada boom.
Well, that was pretty good.
It passed. I wouldn't quite say that it was pretty good. It's interesting because you give that initial input and it feels like it's behind your hands a little bit. Like it takes a minute to react to what you're asking it to do, and then it gives you all of it that you asked for all at once.
So it's that build up and release, and that can be
capacitor.
tough to compensate for sometimes. Yeah.
When you're out there on the road, like, you can't anticipate it, and it's not something that I would want to be surprised by.
That's
in a
exactly.
real emergency
I said something
situation,
very
right?
similar in my notes. Not super friendly in a surprise emergency situation.
You know, we really like testing these top-tier touring tires. They're generally great on the road, and they show us what's possible when the tire manufacturers put everything they've got into designing an all-season tire.
Yeah, and the new products in this test all had a really good showing. And when we added up the scores, one of those even made its way into the top 3 overall.
Since these are premium touring tires, on-road refinement is a requirement, and the MaxLife 2 led the test thanks to its excellent comfort in both ride and noise. The familiar Assurance Weather Ready 2 and the True Contact Tour 54 rounded out the top 3. When looking at how the best here stack up in the touring category as a whole, the Assurance MaxLife 2's results are even more impressive, sharing in a tie for second overall. If wet traction is high on your priority list, the Assurance Weather Ready 2, True Contact Tour 54, and Turanza Prestige led this test. In our larger list, the Assurance Weather Ready 2 remains one of the best options in the category, and the True Contact Tour 54 and Turanza Prestige fall mid-pack. The other tires in this test are all closer to the bottom of the overall standings, which really doesn't come as that big of a surprise given they're all very focused on mileage and wet traction is a common trade-off for increased tread life.
And looking at the combined overall rating for this test, Goodyear led the way with the top 2 spots, followed by the Continental with the True Contact Tour 54. In the larger hierarchy, the Assurance Weather Ready 2 retains its spot as the top tire in the category, and the Assurance MaxLife 2 and True Contact Tour 54 are both impressively high in the rankings for standard touring all-season tires.
For drivers who experience the worst conditions winter has to offer, how their tires perform on the ice and in the snow can make all the difference. And we find there are huge differences in traction levels between tires, even from the same performance category. That means the only way to know which tires will get you to where you're going with confidence, and which may leave you at the mercy of the elements, is through testing.
So that's exactly what we do. We take every non-summer tire from our normal test season and we retest them on the ice at a local hockey rink and in the snow at a dedicated winter testing facility in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. We compare acceleration and braking traction, in addition to lateral grip, and we find out how each tire behaves when it's pushed up to and well beyond its limits.
We had a very tight grouping on the ice with the premium tires in this test. From the top to the bottom, there was a third of a second spread and 60-foot acceleration, and 6 feet separating the Turanza EverDrive's braking distance from the Avid Ascend LX, which was the longest in the group.
We test 0 to 12 mile an hour acceleration and 25 to 0 mile an hour braking in the snow, and we measure both in feet, so we report the distance required to accelerate from stop to 12 and the distance needed to bring the vehicle to rest from 25. This allows us to add both measurements together to come up with a single number that's representative of each tire's straight-line traction in the snow. In straight-line snow testing, the two new Bridgestone products stood head and shoulders above the rest, especially the Turanza Prestige, which delivered combined acceleration and braking that was 9 feet shorter than its brand mate and over 36 feet shorter than the Defender 2. Surprisingly, the Assurance Weather Ready 2, which is the only all-weather tire in the test, was lower mid-pack, requiring an additional 24 feet compared to the test-leading Bridgestone.
Straight-line traction is arguably what drivers feel most often and how many evaluate their tires in snowy weather. But driving doesn't just happen in straight lines, and how a tire turns and behaves at the limit can be a bigger contributing factor to both safety and overall satisfaction in the real world. Here, the Assurance Weather Ready 2 held a small advantage over the Turanza Prestige, thanks to its more confident lateral traction and combination grip that allowed us to ask the front tires to do more at once. The Turanza Prestige and Turanza EverDrive were hot on the Goodyear's heels subjectively, and the Turanza Prestige was noticeably faster on the stopwatch as well.
When we combine the results of all our testing to determine an overall subjective score for the road, wet, dry, and winter, the 3 tires at the top of the chart represent the 3 groups included in this test. The Assurance Weather Ready 2 is an all-weather Grand Touring All-Season tire, the True Contact Tour 54 is Standard Touring All-Season, and the new Turanza Prestige is Grand Touring All-Season without the Three Peak Mountain Snowflake brand, though it still impressed our team in the snow.
Winter performance is the final component to our test, and it's a big one if you experience winter's worst.
So when you combine those results with what we found earlier on the road, in the wet and in the dry, we can complete the full picture of every tire's year-round capability. Plus, we have updated overall ratings for anyone whose year-round driving includes snow and ice.
Looking at all the tires we've tested on the Camry, the Turanza EverDrive is the only one from this test to break into the top 5 on the ice. While it's only around 7 feet behind the leading Pirelli, that gap is larger than the spread between all the tires in this year's test, so it is a significant number.
In the snow, 3 of the tires from this test landed in the top 10 overall for combined acceleration and braking capability. Michelin's venerable Cross Climate 2 still holds the top spot in this metric, but the Turanza Prestige is only 2 feet behind, and impressively, it out-accelerated the Michelin. The Standard Touring All-Season Turanza EverDrive and True Contact Tour 54 are also in the top 10 overall, and the Defender 2 is in the bottom quartile, though still more than 30 feet in front of the weakest tire we've tested.
When looking at drivability and usable traction in the day-to-day winter commute, the top tires in this test were very good, and the Assurance Weather Ready 2 managed to eke out a tie for 3rd to land on the podium. The Weather Grip and Cross Climate 2 are still the highest-rated touring tires for subjective capability in the snow, and the Turanza Prestige slots in just behind the 3rd-place tie.
Of all the touring tires we've tested with our full road, wet, dry, and winter protocols, the Assurance Weather Ready 2 is at the top. It's not the strongest in any one of our evaluations, but it performs at a high level across all our testing, which is the balance needed from a Grand Touring All-Season tire. The Bridgestone Quatrac Pro Plus and Michelin Cross Climate 2 complete the podium and represent very compelling touring options as well.
So when we look at the overall ratings for the touring category as a whole, From this test, we have the Assurance Weather Ready 2, which is now the top tire in the category. We also have the True Contact Tour 54 and the brand new Turanza Prestige. And both of those are non-Three Peak Mountain Snowflake branded tires, which is an interesting twist. Perhaps that means that the technology that tire manufacturers are using in their all-weather tires are trickling down to their other touring products.
We hope you found this test helpful for finding the right premium touring tires for your vehicle based on what, where, and how you drive.
If you have any questions or other feedback, leave them in the comments below. We try to read and respond to as many of those as we can. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.